Ladies and gentlemen, let me ask you something. What if the most powerful move you could ever make was the one where you did absolutely nothing? What if your silence spoke louder than any words, and your absence became the loudest presence in his life? See, most people believe that love is about proving your worth, about showing up even when you're not being valued, about making sure they see what they're missing. But let me tell you something, real power doesn't come from chasing, it comes from walking away and letting them feel the void you once filled. There's a reason why people regret losing someone who goes silent. It's psychological. The moment you stop reaching out, stop explaining, stop proving yourself, something shifts. Suddenly, the power dynamic flips. The person who once took you for granted starts to wonder, why is she calling? Why is she chasing? Did she move on? And that last question, that's the one that drives them crazy. Because the moment they think you're no longer available is the moment they realize what they've lost. See, people don't miss you when you're constantly there. They miss you when they notice your absence. When they see that you're no longer accessible. When they feel the energy shift and realize that you're not waiting by the phone hoping for a text. And the most powerful part, you're not doing this as a game. You're doing this because you finally understand your worth. You're not a backup plan. You're not someone's second choice. You are the prize. And anyone who fails to see that will have to live with their regret. Now, let's get something straight. No contact isn't about making him miss you. It's about making you remember who you are. It's about breaking free from the emotional chains that kept you stuck in a cycle of self-doubt and proving your value to someone who should have seen it from the start. It's about removing your energy from places where it wasn't appreciated and redirecting it toward your own growth, happiness, and success. And here's the harsh truth. If you keep reaching out, if you keep checking in, if you keep trying to stay friends just to keep a connection alive, you're not giving them a chance to regret losing you. You're giving them reassurance. You're showing them that no matter what they do, no matter how they treated you, you're still there. And that's the fastest way to kill attraction, respect, and any chance of them realizing what they lost. But when you go silent, when you stop responding, stop explaining, stop showing up for someone who didn't show up for you, something powerful happens. They start to feel the emptiness, the space where your laughter used to be, the comfort of your presence, the effort you once gave so freely. And suddenly, it's not so easy for them anymore. They'll check their phone expecting a message that never comes. They'll scroll through old conversations, replaying the moments they once ignored, and it'll hit them. You were the real deal. You were the one who cared, who gave, who was always there. And now you're nowhere to be found. That's when the regret sets in. That's when they start thinking, did I make a mistake? That's when they realize that replacing you isn't as easy as they thought, because anyone can find attention, but real connection, that's rare. But here's where most people go wrong. They break no contact too soon. They let their emotions get the best of them. They see a like on social media, a random text, and suddenly they think, maybe he misses me. Stop. Missing you isn't enough. Wanting you back isn't enough. The real question is, does he regret losing you enough to change? Because if the answer is no, then his regret means nothing. The moment you stop trying to control the outcome is the moment you truly win. Because while he's sitting there wondering where you went, you'll be out there living your life, glowing, thriving, and stepping into the version of yourself that was always meant to shine. And that's the ultimate truth. You don't go no contact to make him regret leaving. You go no contact to find yourself again. And in that process, if he realizes what he lost, that's his lesson to learn. Let me ask you something. Why do people always seem to want what they can't have? Why does someone only realize your worth after you've walked away? There's a deep psychology behind it. And if you understand this, you'll never look at relationships the same way again. When someone leaves you, they expect you to chase. They expect you to break down, to beg, to show them just how much they meant to you. But what happens when you do the opposite? What happens when you disappear? When you don't reach out, when you act like they never existed? That's when something powerful happens. That's when regret starts to creep in. Silence is not just the absence of words. It's a psychological trigger that forces the mind to start filling in the blanks. When you're constantly reaching out, explaining, trying to get closure, you're making it easy for them. They don't have to wonder how you feel. They don't have to miss you. They don't have to regret anything because you're still there, proving your love, proving your pain. More is the exact thing they never considered. See, when someone walks away, they assume you'll always be an option, that no matter what, you'll still be there, waiting, hoping, longing for them to come back. And as long as you keep proving them right, they have no reason to regret losing you. But when you go silent, when you show them that you're not waiting, when they see that you've moved forward without them, that's when the regret becomes real. The human brain is wired to chase what's uncertain. The moment something is out of reach, the value of it skyrockets. That's why the more available you are, the less attractive you become. The more you chase, the more power you give away. But when you remove yourself, when you stop showing up, when you let go completely, that's when they start feeling the weight of their own decisions. They start remembering the way you loved them, the way you cared, the way you were always there. And now you're gone. And here's the truth. Regret doesn't happen overnight. At first, they might feel relieved. They might even convince themselves that they made the right choice. But as days turn into weeks and weeks turn into months, something shifts. They see you smiling, they see you glowing, they hear about you doing well, and suddenly their mind starts playing tricks on them. They start comparing. They start realizing that what they had with you wasn't something they could replace, and then it hits them. They let go of something rare. But here's where most people fail. They can't handle the silence. They get impatient. They start wondering, is this even working? And in a moment of weakness, they break no contact. They send a message. They check in. And just like that, the power shifts back. Listen to me. If you want them to regret losing you, you have to be willing to disappear completely. No texts, no calls, no checking their social media, no accidentally running into them. You have to become a mystery. And let's be honest, this isn't just about making them miss you. This is about making you remember who you are. This is about stepping back into your power. Because the truth is, if someone can walk away from you, they don't deserve unlimited access to you. If someone didn't value you when they had you, then they should feel what it's like to live without you. And by the time they finally realize what they lost, by the time regret hits them like a storm, you'll be so far ahead in your life that their absence won't even matter anymore. There's a moment when everything shifts. A moment when the person who walked away expects you to break, to chase, to prove your worth. But what happens when you don't? What happens when you let them walk and instead of falling apart, you rise? That's when the regret starts. That's when they realize they underestimated you. Because the moment you stop chasing is the moment they start wondering. The moment you elevate is the moment they start feeling the weight of their own decision. People always think they want space until they feel the emptiness. At first, they convince themselves they made the right choice. They feel free, they feel in control, but that's only because they assume you're still there, waiting, hoping, longing for them to return. And as long as you keep proving them right, they feel nothing. But the second you go silent, the second you step into your power and stop giving them access to your energy, something inside them starts to shift. The mind is wired to desire what feels out of reach. The more available you are, the less they value you. The moment you pull away, the moment they feel your absence, is the moment they begin to question everything. Psychology is simple. People don't miss what they never lose. And if you keep showing up, if you keep calling, if you keep proving your love, you're not allowing them to feel the reality of what life without you actually means. But when you disappear, when you become silent, when you remove yourself completely, that's when they start to feel it. That's when their mind starts playing tricks on them. Well, why isn't she reaching out? Has she moved on? Did she find someone better? And that last question, that's the one that keeps them up at night. Because the idea of you being gone, the idea of you being happy without them, is something they never expected. At first, they won't admit it. They'll act unbothered. They'll pretend like they don't care. But with every passing day, the weight of regret grows heavier. They start thinking about the way you laughed, the way you made them feel, the way you were always there. And now you're nowhere to be found. They'll check their phone expecting a message that never comes. They'll scroll through old conversations, reliving the moments they once ignored. They'll hear a song, see a place, smell a scent, and suddenly it all comes rushing back, because no matter how much they try to push it down, the mind never forgets something real. The biggest mistake people make is thinking they have to remind someone of their worth, thinking they have to prove that they were the best thing that ever happened to them. But let me tell you something. Your absence is more powerful than any words you could ever say. Your silence is a mirror that forces them to reflect. It forces them to sit with their choices. It forces them to wonder if they made a mistake. And the more they wonder, the deeper the regret sinks in. But here's where most people fail. They break no contact too soon. They let their emotions get the best of them. They see a like on social media, a random text, and suddenly they think, maybe he's thinking about me. Stop. Thinking about you isn't enough. Missing you isn't enough. The real question is, does he regret losing you enough to change? Because if the answer is no, then his regret means nothing. You don't go silent to play a game. You don't walk away to manipulate. You do it because you finally understand your worth. Because you refuse to beg for love. Because you know that anyone who truly values you will never put themselves in a position to lose you in the first place. And by the time they finally realize what they lost, by the time regret hits them like a storm, you'll be so far ahead, so focused on yourself, so in love with your own life, that their absence won't even matter anymore. There comes a time when you stop proving your worth to someone who was too blind to see it. A time when you no longer beg to be chosen, to be loved, to be missed. And that's the moment everything shifts. That's the moment they start to feel what they never thought they would regret. Not because you forced them to, not because you tried to change their mind, but because you walked away and never looked back. People don't realize what they have until it's gone. They think they do, but they don't. At first, they feel relieved. They enjoy the space, the freedom, the silence. They convince themselves they made the right choice. But what they don't understand is that time has a way of revealing the truth. And when the initial excitement fades, when the distractions are gone, when they find themselves alone with their thoughts, something shifts inside them. The mind is wired to crave certainty, and when you are there, loving them, caring for them, showing up no matter what, you are their safety net. They didn't have to question if you'd be there tomorrow. They didn't have to wonder if they still had a place in your heart. But the second you remove yourself, the second you stop proving your love, everything changes. Now they have to sit with the reality that you are no longer a guarantee. Now they have to ask themselves, did I make a mistake? The answer doesn't come right away. At first they brush it off. They tell themselves they'll move on. They tell themselves it's no big deal. But then days turn into weeks and weeks turn into months. And suddenly something happens. They hear your name. They see something that reminds them of you. They check their phone, half expecting a message from you, one that never comes, and that's when it hits them. That's when they realize that you were never the problem. See, most people think they want something new until they realize what they gave up. They think they're chasing happiness, but what they don't realize is that happiness wasn't in the next person, the next adventure, the next distraction. It was in the moments they took for granted. The love they thought would always be there, the presence they assumed they would never lose. And now they have to live with the weight of that choice. But here's the truth. Some people will never admit their regret. Their pride won't let them. They'll pretend they're fine. They'll act unbothered. They'll do everything in their power to convince themselves that they made the right decision, but deep down they feel it. They feel the emptiness. They feel the absence. They feel the loss of something real. And no matter how much they try to suppress it, it lingers. Because the mind never forgets a love that was pure. And yet, the biggest mistake people make is thinking they need to remind someone of what they lost, thinking they need to prove that they were special. But the truth is, you never have to convince the right person of your value. The right person will see it. The right person will never put themselves in a position to lose you in the first place. And if someone couldn't appreciate you when they had you, if they needed to lose you to realize your worth, then that is their burden to carry, not yours. What most people don't understand is that silence is not weakness. Walking away is not giving up. It is power. It is self-respect. It is knowing that you were never meant to beg for someone to care, to stay, to choose you. You don't chase. You don't plead. You don't wait for them to wake up and see what they lost. You simply move forward. And by the time they finally realize what they let go of, by the time regret consumes them, you will be so far ahead, so focused on your own happiness, that their absence will no longer hold any weight in your life. There is a moment when everything changes. A moment when you stop waiting, stop proving, stop chasing. A moment when you finally understand you are the prize. And the second you embrace that truth, everything shifts. Because when you see your own value, when you step into your power, that's when the regret begins to set in. Not for you, but for the one who let you go. At first, he won't feel it. He'll convince himself he made the right choice. He'll enjoy the space, the silence, the illusion of freedom. But what he doesn't realize is that his comfort came from knowing you were still there, knowing you were still invested, knowing that no matter how far he pushed, you'd always pull him back. And that's where he was wrong. Because the second you choose yourself, the second you stop showing up, his world begins to shift. People don't regret losing what they think they still have access to. They only feel the loss when the door is locked, when the energy is withdrawn, when the silence is louder than any words ever spoken. He expected you to fight for him. He expected you to reach out, to ask, to beg, but you did the one thing he never thought you would. You walked away with dignity. And that's what haunts him. Not your words, not your tears, but your absence. The mind works in patterns and habits. When you were there, he knew exactly where to find you. He knew you'd answer. He knew you'd be available. He knew he could return whenever he pleased. But the moment that pattern is broken, the moment he realizes he no longer holds that power over you, something shifts inside him. He starts to wonder. He starts to question. And most of all, he starts to feel. At first, it's subtle. A random thought, a passing memory, a moment of curiosity. But as time goes on, as he realizes you're not coming back, it begins to grow. He starts to check his phone, waiting for a message that never arrives. He replays old conversations, searching for signs he overlooked. He starts to wonder if someone else has taken your place, if someone else is experiencing the warmth he once took for granted. And that thought alone is enough to keep him up at night. What most people don't understand is that regret is an instant. It builds over time. It starts as a whisper and grows into a storm. The more he realizes you're gone, the deeper it sinks in. The more he sees you thriving without him, the heavier it weighs on him. Because deep down he knows. He knows you were rare. He knows you were different. He knows he had something special, and he let it slip through his fingers. But here's the key. You don't do this to make him regret. You don't walk away for the sake of a reaction. You do it because you finally understand your worth, because you refuse to be an option when you are meant to be a priority, because you are done settling for anything less than the love and respect you deserve. And that's what makes you unforgettable. That's what makes you the one that got away. The biggest mistake people make is thinking they have to prove their value, that they have to remind someone of what they lost. But the truth is, the right person will never need reminding. The right person will know from the very beginning that you are a prize, that your presence is a privilege, not a guarantee. And anyone who fails to see that, anyone who chooses to walk away, is simply making room for someone who will. By the time he realizes what he lost, by the time the regret has fully set in, you will be so far ahead, so deeply in love with yourself and your life, that his absence won't even matter anymore. And that is the greatest power you will ever hold. Because when you know you are the prize, you never have to chase. You simply keep rising and let the ones who fail to see your worth watch from a distance, knowing they can never have access to you again. And there comes a time when you stop explaining yourself. A time when you stop chasing, stop proving, stop waiting for someone to realize your worth. And that's the moment everything changes. That's the moment they start to feel what they never expected. Regret. Not because you begged, not because you pleaded, but because you did the one thing they never thought you would. You moved on. You stopped making them the center of your world. You stopped looking back, and nothing is more powerful than that. At first, they don't feel it. They convince themselves they made the right choice. They enjoy the space, the silence, the illusion of freedom. They tell themselves they're better off without you, that you were never that special, that they won't even notice your absence. But what they don't understand is that regret doesn't come immediately. It builds over time. It starts as a small whisper, a passing thought, a moment of curiosity, and then it grows. Because the mind cannot ignore what was once familiar. You see, people take advantage of what they believe will always be there. They assume they can walk away, that you'll be waiting, that your love was something they could return to whenever they pleased. But the moment you shift your focus, the moment you stop trying to prove your worth, that's when the tables turn. Because nothing is more unsettling than realizing that someone who once gave you their all is now thriving without you. They expect you to be broken. They expect you to reach out, to check in, to wonder about them. But instead, you are rising, you are glowing, you are becoming everything they once doubted. And that is the kind of regret that lingers. Because they don't just lose you, they lose the chance to be part of the future you're building. People don't regret losing someone who begs for their attention. They regret losing someone they can no longer reach. Someone who has transformed their pain into power. Someone who has taken heartbreak and turned it into fuel. Because the best kind of revenge isn't anger, isn't bitterness, isn't trying to make them jealous. The best revenge is success. And success doesn't mean waiting for them to notice. It doesn't mean living for their reaction. It means focusing on yourself so deeply that their presence or absence no longer affects you. It means becoming so fulfilled, so confident, so at peace, that by the time they realize what they lost, you don't even care anymore. They will watch from a distance. They will hear about you through mutual friends. They will check your page trying to piece together the life you've built without them. And when they see you smiling, when they see you living, when they see you becoming someone they never thought you'd be without them, that's when the regret sets in. Not because they want you back, but because they finally understand what they took for granted. But here's the truth, they made their choice, and now they have to live with it. Meanwhile, you are free. Free from their doubts, free from their mind games, free from the version of yourself that believed you needed them to be whole. Because the moment you choose yourself, the moment you decide that your future is worth more than their validation, you win. And that is something they will never be able to take away from you.